Physio down in Cork, and Bernard Smyth there in Ultimate Conditioning in Trim. So the both
Okay.
guys have their specific, I suppose, specialities as regards training and coaching. It's great to have them. A lot of people that would know them from, particularly from the sport races, they're always up there, usually battling hard for podiums,
Usually
usually
one more than one further
bat,
up than the other.
battling against the other. Well, I think there's a
There was one, Kelly. There was one event,
Well,
huh?
what you beat him in one, is it?
I remember it well, man. I remember it well.
But it's
it's
like
always a very friendly competition.
yeah. Anyway, we're going to kick off. Then John's going to go
Yeah.
first and just give us a few minutes. So we're going to have the two lads go through their bits and pieces of just general advice that any of us can pick up. You know, some people will find certain things more interesting, but just stick with us. Hopefully, will be 20 to 25 minutes type thing with each of the lads, and then we'll have a good question and answers afterwards. So if you have any specific questions, if you could put them in the chat box initially, and then Susan will coordinate it. And just to let you know, we're recording the session. I see most of you aren't showing there in your videos, but just it's a standard thing to just let people know that we are recording the session so that we can circulate it for other people that weren't able to attend. So
Cool.
thanks a lot,
All
everybody,
right.
for joining. We're going to have everybody on mute then apart from whoever's speaking. So on you go, John. Best of luck, and
Yeah.
everyone again for joining us.
All right. And so, can you make me host, or can I just? You can see my screen now. Can you all?
Yeah.
Yep.
Brilliant.
Perfect.
All right. So, let me see. So let me just get in here. Let's see. Ah, yeah. Right, lads. For those of you who don't know me, I'm John. I'm a Waterford fella down here in Cork, and I'm doing a lot of specialising in bike fitting, physio-led bike fitting. And I said I'd kind of come up with a talk today that would like maybe answer the biggest question out there is like, do I need it? Do I even need a bike fit? You know? And all I can say is that the science behind bike fitting has come on a lot, like over the years. It used to be, you know, your elbow to the tip of your middle finger, and it's just improved over the years. We've got some great like technology that can help us steer a bike fit, and we have like more physio science involved in the overall picture. So if I was to present it, I let you guys make up your minds, or girls, if you want to, if you think a bike fit is for you. But let's just go through, you know, the real obvious injuries that can happen from cycling and the role of physio and bike fit within that. So the first one is that if I was just to give the list, you've got like the knee, low back, and neck and shoulders. They'd be kind of your top three. The knee and the back are the main two. Then you have handlebar palsy, which is a fancy name for numbness, the hand numbness. The foot can get numb, it can get hot. Saddle sores are a big deal, actually. They're probably up there with the top two as well. And then you have numbness in the saddle area and erectile dysfunction and genital issues, which we're going to cover as well because they're that important. In fact, I can say it now that they should not be part of the game, everyone. You shouldn't just have to put up with like numbness, and people have just sort of said like that, oh, that's part of cycling, like just get on with it, but it's not. And in fact, I have a case where thankfully the guy came into me because he only did one, he had a new bike, he was real keen, and he went out and he 100k spin, and he had numbness, he had erectile dysfunction for 3 weeks and numbness. So it's nothing to be laughed at, and it needs to be sorted and get the right help. Okay. If we go in then into, before I go into the nitty gritty of the symptoms, can I just talk to both the beginners and the more experienced in cycling? Because this lovely chart here on the right is telling us how we really should be pedaling the bike, right? It's not just as simple as pushing down when your foot gets to like horizontal. We actually need to kind of drive across the top of the pedal stroke. Because if you see the blue box there at the 12 o'clock, you really want to be starting that pedal actively pushing across from 10 a.m. and driving across the top and then down into the power phase, which is considered 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. So the technology that can really show this is on the left here. You can see these force time plots. Okay, they're you know, this crowd called GBMIs. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're kind of making names in the business. they're a German group, and they've got pressure mapping technology. So they've put their pressure maps inside in the shoe, and they can pick up the force time when we're pedaling. And so they can really see at that red box, which is the 3 o'clock, are we able to maintain force at this point in the pedal stroke for long, or do we just peak and then drop off? So they're really pushing the boundaries in technology for bike fit. I'm not going to go into any more of it here, but I just wanted to get across the point of looking at your pedal stroke and maybe making the effort to make changes there, because that will actually be super beneficial in the long run for any event you're doing, if you're pedaling well versus the guy or girl that's kind of just pushing away on the pedals. So let's get stuck into the kind of some of the reasons why we get problems on the bike, right? So we've got a big red box over here in the corner that I'm not going to touch on, but hopefully we stay upright when we're cycling. But if we look at instability, which is a fancy name for saying you're just not controlling your movement on the bike, okay? So we have instability that can happen at a contact point. So that's like a saddle, on the pedals, or on the hands, right? They're your 3 contact points. And then you can have poor movement, poor ability to control movement between the contact points. So that's your knee, your shoulder, and your trunk, okay? Then you have overload, and actually only Padraig O'Connor, who's not here tonight, he's a man who knows that I'm after actually causing my own injury through overload recently, which it probably come out before the end of the talk, because I want to actually make an example of myself. But that can happen if you're too keen or you're doing something new. That can happen. Pressure is force over area, and that's what this technology that I'm holding here, that's what this technology can measure. And excess pressure can give us saddle issues and stuff. And then weight distribution, like how are you sitting on the bike? Have you got too much of your weight on the handlebars and not enough on the saddle? That's your percentage distribution across the bike. So there, if you look at, just to categorize it again, if you look at instability, that can give us back pain, it can give us neck pain and knee and foot problems. Pressure, like I said, will give rise to numbness in the saddle area, the saddle sores. And then the weight distribution can actually cause neck pain. If you've got too much weight of your body up the front of the bike, you can just load up the neck muscles and shoulder muscles too much, and they can get annoyed on the bike, right? And then I said to anything kind of overload, you're looking at tendons. My own story is a hamstring tendon up at the sitting bone area, but you can have any sort of tendon. Achilles, glute tendons can get annoyed if we do too much too soon. So what I wanted to say before I move on is like how common it is, guys and girls. It's like 87% of us will get symptoms when we cycle, which is probably why I seem to be pretty busy even during lockdown, like with people coming to me with pain on the bikes, okay? Really common. Like, so there was a big study there, a big event down in South Africa, 15,000 cyclists went to it. So they got 3,300 of them to reply to a survey. And this is what they found, that neck and back is like 40 to 45% of the 3,300, right? And it was kind of equal across male and female. And then like you get buttock and perineum area, that's not a 40% again. So all very common. It's actually, what I wanted to get across here is that although it might say hand and wrist, 40% of people, but only 30% of those were kind of pain. The rest was numbness. So it's not only pain, it can be neurological, right? And then like, if you look down here, the buttock area, the saddle area, 50% pain and 50% numbness in that area. So why is this happening? We're going to cover that later on. I just wanted to get across this guy. He's actually not afraid to talk to the camera. Freddie Flintoff, in fairness to him, he actually revealed on a charity ride from London to Paris. He had to get off the bike after a couple of days. I was trying to think of a good name. He couldn't feel his bat and balls, right? He called it a dead fish, but like he wouldn't get back on the bike, and rightfully so, because if you continue that ride, you can actually cause some permanent issues with that nerve down there, okay? So it's, like I said, it's serious, and it's not just guys. There's a girl here, Hannah Dines, for the GB team, Paralympic team, and she had to like eventually see a gynecologist. She was getting serious swelling of the kind of labia area and needed like surgical intervention in the end. She put up with it for so long because it was a kind of a taboo area, but she's been on the papers, media talking about it. So, and you can actually see, and we're going to see later, like how tilted anteriorly or how forward her pelvis is tilted onto that soft tissue areas and how that could be a problem there, right? And so the bike fit is hugely important and the type of saddle is hugely important. And then I just wanted to say how much we can't be stopped. Like cyclists just keep going. Like only 1% of the buttock perineum problems stopped people cycling. 9% of the back issues stop people. If you notice here, 17% of the knee. So the knee tends to be the one that will kind of maybe stop people from cycling and they kind of seek help, you know. So the way I want to kind of present it is through some case studies. But before I want to focus on a few things. I don't have time to go into all the different areas of soreness, okay? So I was going to focus on the back and the hand numbness and then maybe a bit around the saddle numbness, okay? So with the back issues, there's two categories. You can have it coming on during cycling. So some of you might notice, yeah, after about an hour and a half, my lower back gets sore. And I can improve it if I straighten my back and sit up off the saddle, but then it gets sore again after a while. So the science here now is not fantastic, right? But there is a study that shows nicely, there's not that many subjects in it rightfully, but it does show that when they put a measuring device on the lower back, and when that measuring device measured an excessive amount of flexion, so just basically someone who's just overly bent, like a banana back. I'll show you on the bike now in a second. That was an indicator for backache on the bike. And so that's a bike fit will help with that, just to identify that lower back area and try to maybe not have it as flexed. The other issue that can come and give back pain is instability. So we said it's a failure to control movement. And again, a study showed that if there was excessive rocking of the pelvis on the saddle, that it caused pain in those cyclists versus those that were more stable. And actually, it's that gadget there, guys, that what you do is you just slip it onto a saddle like that, and then it talks to my computer through Bluetooth, and then I can pick up how much movement the person is moving on the saddle. And I'm going to show you examples of this in the presentation, because that's how you know if someone's unstable or not. Then, of course, don't rule out just poor movement patterns off the bike. You know, if someone has back pain, it's not only because of the bike, it can be because they're just poorly moving. And that's where physio comes in to kind of identify that and teach normal movement. So if you were just to simplify it, backache can happen if the person is too, I brought a pelvis as well. So I don't know if you're seeing my screen. So the pelvis sitting on the saddle, if the person is too rolled back this way so that their lower back is like a banana, that can be an indicator for back pain. And then if they're the opposite and they're too rolled that way and their back is really flat, like that lady we saw on the bike, that could give rise to numbness and saddle issues. So the next one then is the handlebar numbness, guys. We know if there's too much loading going on through the hands, that can just be excessive pressure on the nerves going into the hands, and it can give the numbness in the hand, right? What's cool about the pressure mapping is it'll tell me how much force is going through the saddle, and if there's not at least half the body weight of the rider, there should be at least half their body weight, and if there isn't, then we know there's too much going up the front of the bike. So they're the kind of things to look for. So why don't I just show you a little bit of a demo. I brought the bike up to the room. I'm going to show you like a typical kind of backache position on the bike, and also the wrist ones and the poor hand position. Right. So we'll see if someone is sitting on the bike and they're very like banana backed like this, kind of very rounded. So maybe the bike is not, it's too long, it's too much of a reach. And they want to sit on their sitting bones. That's what I must talk to you in a second. But some people want to sit on their sitting bones, and some people don't mind sitting more on the front of the sitting bone area. But for those that sit mostly on the sitting bones, they have to be careful that there's not too much of a flexion here, because that can give us backache. And then those who want to be too much flat back like this, they have to be careful that they don't compress that nerve and cause numbness. Then if we bring it along here, this is the one I really see commonly, guys. I've termed it walrus wrists, okay? Because it's like this kind of move, this kind of hand position. They have their hands like that. Does anyone know anyone like this? And they're sitting on the bike and the hands are like that going along. And it can be an indicator that the handlebars are too far away and that they're trying to find a hand position closer to the top bar. So they end up going like that. And again, that's going to kind of, it can just irritate the nerves coming through the carpal tunnel here and give us some hand numbness. And also instability on the saddle. So if someone, say for instance, the bike, the saddle is too high and someone is like rocking on the saddle, that they're going to want to get stability from somewhere else. And so what they can do, what they end up doing is grabbing onto the handlebars and with straight arms, trying to stabilize themselves. And it can, that's shown in the research, and that also cause some neck issues and some sore and can cause tension in the hands and numbness. So if I come back then to, well, this one I won't stay on long on, but I want to just bring up something here, lads. Foot numbness, just make sure that your shoe is not too small. It's pretty common. People are wearing these small Italian narrow shoes and their foot is very wide, and that will squash the foot and it'll squash the nerves inside in the foot, and you're going to get numbness that way. So take the insole out of your bike shoe, stand on it and see if the insole is way too small for your foot, then you need a wider pair of shoes. Shimano do a good wide shoe, and so do a company called Lake. And if your shoe is way too big for you and your foot is floating around in there, that can cause the toes to grip and fill up the shoe, and you know, maybe get an insole in there to fill it if that's the case, or else a tighter fitting shoe is what you need. And just to mention there around insoles, they really do actually play a role in cycling, and it's to do with this this thing here called the windlass mechanism. When we walk, we get this lovely arch support happening in the foot because the big toe extends like that when we walk. But when we're in a bike shoe, we're stuck in the shoe, so we don't get any big toe movement, and so we don't get a lovely arch support. So you can have the foot, the arch collapsing inside in the bike shoe, and it can give rise to knee pain. It's also inefficient pedal stroke. So I don't usually push insoles, certainly not on land, but in the bike there is a space for them. Okay, so like a nice way to explain it is a case study. So here's a lady, she got new into adventure racing and triathlon, but she was an experienced runner, and she was getting sort of backache and some upper neck and headaches, right? So we can see here on the left, I felt just observational wise, she was a bit squashed, like she was desperate to try and find the back of the saddle. Her sit bones were at the very back of the saddle, which you'll get to see in a minute. And she was also up a little bit too high. If you can see here, the angle is not clear, but it's 146 degrees at her knee. And the research around the knee angle is pretty good. The rest of them aren't fantastic, but the knee, we should really keep it below 145, like between 140 and 145, depending on their flexibility. So we dropped the saddle a little bit, but we pushed it back, and that was able to kind of give her a little bit better posture on the bike. Now, before I go on, like I tried to mention it when I was on the bike myself. Some people will sit on the saddle with more of their sitting bones on it, and that will have a bit more of a rounded back, and that's fine, okay? And then some people will like to roll a little bit more forward, and they'll sit a bit more on the front of the pubic rami bone in here, and they'll be a bit more flatter back, and that's the way they are. So we have two different types of cyclists, and that's going to come into play in the saddle choice at the end of my talk. So what did her saddle map look like? On the left, we can see, you don't really need to know how the technology works. You can see a lot of movement here. This black line moving all over the place. And then we were able to kind of bring it right into within recommended limits, 25 millimeters movement from left to right. So we definitely improved her stability. So job done there. And that's why I like it. It's very transparent and easy to see if you've made a difference. For this man, I've included him because, well, Padraig asked me, one of the questions from the audience was numbness in gentlemen and men. Like, so this guy complained of actual genital numbness after 45 minutes. And if you look at him, like before and after, he's quite similar. He's got the same knee angle. Now, if you look closely, his heel is higher on the before picture, and then it's a little lower on the after picture. So he was excessive. He was reaching basically. So we had to drop his saddle, was it 5 millimeters? And we brought it a bit closer, okay? Now, he's a kind of cyclist that likes to sit more rolled forward, like I was explaining. So he could be prone to numbness, but he doesn't have to have numbness if he's set up correctly. And I'll also say, if you are getting numbness, it could be basically the saddle being a little bit high, because what you're trying to do is find the lower part of the saddle because you're up too high, if you get me. And that's where the nose of the saddle is. So if I show you his saddle map, it really makes sense. You can see the left one is the pre-bike fit, and you see this yellow area of pressure and that's in the pubic area, and that's where his nerve was being compressed. And then from those changes we made, we dropped his center of pressure, came back, which is the squiggly black line. So that's where we want it, back behind that red line there. So if I let you see it working, it's kind of nice to get an idea. This is a quick video. It just shows the pressure. You can see it coming in and out on the left, and there's a little red dot that you might not see, but that's the center of pressure. So, and then this guy, the last case study, he's a fella who was getting hand numbness as well as some backache. Now here you can definitely see, I hope you can see, he's too squashed on the bike. There's just not enough room in there, and it's causing his back to kind of bend a little bit too much. And his shoulder angle, his shoulders are coming steep down onto the handlebars. So that caused too much pressure and force through his hands, you know. So what we did with him is give him a longer stem and also lift his saddle up. If you can see that there, yeah. So the saddle height went up by 7 millimeters, and his saddle went back by a nice bit, like 12 millimeters. And we put a bigger stem on, and you can see the difference now in his shoulder angle. So that resulted in much more force on his saddle. So therefore, if you've got more force on your saddle, it means you're going to have less force on your handlebars, and that means his hand numbness resolved. So if you see this box, it's got 400 newtons on the pre-bike fit, and we increased that to 550 newtons. So that's equal to 55 kgs, you know, and he weighed about 80 kgs. So we know we're doing well there. He's got over half his body weight. So it's nice the way you can see what's going on. So to kind of come away from that and into the solution, right? So don't drag on. I would say my advice from a physio bike fitter, like it's not really going to get better if you're getting some backache and you're just hoping for it to go away. Like because cycling is it can be a good rehab tool, but it can also be a kind of a tricky. It can stir up problems because you're kind of stuck in the bike. You know, your feet are typically they're connected to the pedals, and you're kind of set up as your bike is. So it tends to just not go away. So try and address it earlier. Even though we see in the research cyclists just keep cycling, but it can be helped by someone who knows what they're doing. and that's where I've got like evidence-based treatment and rehab. So if someone has like, if you've developed a tendon issue, maybe you're running too much or too much, Bernard might cover a bit of that, like poor training principles. Get the right treatment, get someone who knows how to help these tendon overload issues, and they're using the evidence to research, which, by the way, doesn't include sticking their thumb into it and hoping it'll go away and rubbing it. There's a bit more research around now. Professional bike fit, I suppose I put that in like, someone who's been on courses and they have technology that is worthwhile, and they have a bit of experience in that area. And then lastly, saddle choice, right? If I was to finish on a kind of a very controversial area, okay, it's just because people are chancing their arm, thinking they can, oh look, this saddle doesn't work, and they keep trying different ones. But actually, there's a science behind it that I want to just finish on and hand over to Bernard then. So I have the two types now. I am a partner with this crowd, this German crowd, GBMized, and they invented the saddle mapping. So they researched saddles for like 12 years, and they know what they're talking about in that area, right? And so they've made two types of saddles. They've got a kind of a T-shaped saddle with a kind of if you can see my screen, it's got a long nose, and it forms a T at the top and then down into the nose. And then they have a V-shaped saddle, and you can see there's more of a wing on it. Okay. Now, the V-shaped saddle is perfect for someone like myself on a bike, because I sit more rolled forward with a kind of a flatter back, and then that would be the way I naturally would sit. So I need a V-shaped saddle because I'm going to be kind of if you see my mouse cover, my cursor here, I'm going to be sort of sitting in the V in the wing area of the saddle. So I need width there to support me. Whereas if someone sits more pronounced on their sitting bones, they're going to be at the back of the saddle. So they need the room at the back, and then they need some leg room, and that's why it's a T. There's no wings here because that would get in the way. So they need a nice bit of leg room here for the thigh. So that would be it. So if you have to figure out what kind of how you sit on a bike, and then you can decide what type of saddle you need. The only thing to look out for here is your flexibility. Like, I didn't bring it up too much in the talk, but you see this guy here, right? He's got very good flexibility. That is recommended for all of us cyclists, that we can get our hamstrings happy to lengthen and get into these type of positions. Because if you got terrible like restriction in your hamstrings and you can only get as far as here, you can only get down as here, and you can't get any more. You can't get down, then that's going to impact on your saddle height. Because that gentleman who had the numbness in the case study, he didn't have good hamstring flexibility. So we had to lower his saddle more than we could if he had good flexibility. So if you're limiting your flexibility, you might actually have to move to a V-shaped saddle, because you're not going to be able to sit at the back of the saddle. So there's a bit of that kind of thing going on. But all I want to say in this talk is work on that mobility, because it benefits your biking. That there showed you, that's exactly what I've said. You need good flexibility there if you want to use this type of saddle. But if you have it, it's the way to go. And then you see this one I have with the cutaway. So if numbness is rated more than 5 out of 10 in your, as a problem for you, then get yourself a cutaway. If you rate numbness less than 5, then go with the full, because you get more surface area. So it's only if you really rate numbness as a problem. And to be honest, that's kind of it. I think I'm in around that 20 minutes. I just wanted to close with services I do offer back down here in Cork. I do running analysis and running injury rehab, and I'm starting up a new service, which is not new. I've been doing it a year, but I feel confident in running it now. It's gas analysis, fitness testing, and finding out your limitations and, you know, your target heart rate zones and all that. So it's been going really nice actually. And I do workshops in adventure racing as well that hopefully I'll get to start up again if we can get out of this fog. And then I do a new bike tour down in Kerry. So I shall shut the gob and hand over to the nemesis there, Bernard.
That's great. Thanks, John. That was very informative. We have a few very relevant questions come in there, but we'll hold on to them till the man from the Royal County has his say. Anyway, we're going to the green and gold, very apt for a Paddy's Day. So Bernard Smyth from Ultimate Conditioning and Trim.
Yeah, there we go. And cheers, Paul. Thanks for that. And cheers, John. Yeah, I invited John, to be honest. And if it was closer to home, to be honest, I'd be sending a lot of people down to him as well. And on the bike fit, it is very, very important. But John can cover that, and has covered that obviously. But I would rate it quite highly on performance-wise and stuff like that for people if they're not comfortable on the bike. Yeah, so basically what I want to talk about, guys, is common things that I would see. So I would coach a lot of people from, and I know we've got a very broad range of people here from different styles of events. So I would race short course adventure races. You know, there's long, there's teams, there's ultras. So I coach basically from sport, from people starting off right through to really quite large stuff, ultras and Race Around Ireland, Race Across America. I've coached those guys as well. So, you know, I have a broad range in what's going on, but I just wanted to really cover the biggest things that I come across when people come to me looking for coaching, and try and kind of help you out in how to avoid doing them. Number one, if you're not working with a coach, or if you want to try and work away and just nail down a few things in your own training. So if there is a few questions, guys, we will make it a bit interactive. Like, I know we're going to hold a bit of Q&A at the end, but if you have a couple of questions there, as I work through, you can fire them through. I'll try and get them as well. And if there's some more at the end, we can talk a bit more of that if people are stuck for time with that. But to start off, one of the biggest things that I would see when people come to me from both short course and really long, or, you know, moving through the spectrum all the way up to ultra, is their training intensities. So that would be one of the biggest ones. So if I sit down and look at somebody's plan, you know, and they're saying that they want to get to X, Y, and Z, or they're not making too much progress here, or they want to try and develop a bike or a run if they're into multi-sport, the biggest thing I would see was too much intensity, but not on the higher end. And, you know, it's generally right in the middle. So it's that, what people tend to call the tempo kind of zone, or just below threshold, but they do it for an awful long time. So for example, you know, if they were doing a couple of bikes during the week and they didn't really have a plan, they were out, you know, their hour bike or 90-minute bike could be always, you know, and that's kind of just below threshold or tempo, and they're just trying to fly around. And then they do the same again on a Thursday or whatever, and then they go out and do a long spin at the weekend, which is, you know, generally with people, and it just tends to be the same thing again. So their intensity is always just below threshold, and they just get stale. There's no development there. Is one of the biggest things that I would see when it comes to people's training. So yeah, that'll come back. I'll come back to that later on, but it's about having a plan and to work on specific items and specific things, and to knock that intensity down a bit. Because you're not working strength, you're not really working aerobic endurance specifically, you're not working, you know, your muscular endurance, your anaerobic endurance, you're just kind of sitting in that one zone. So there's no play to develop anywhere in that. So that would be one of the biggest things that I would see when people come in, is that just the intensity is way too high. So they're just plateauing, they're not really getting anywhere. Another thing, guys, again, that I would see with people, and it's if they're generally in, is that they've a random training. So there's no consistency in their training. So they would, you know, they might run on a Monday. It could be a speed session. It could be, you know, just a random run. Tuesday could be a bike, and so on. Like, so all their training is random. It's picked, and it's just all over the place. And that in itself is not a major issue if you just want to get through an event. So if you're, for example, a short course event, it won't be too much of an issue. But if you've got a really long event, so quite a long one, there was a question that came in about a 24-hour event. that's not really going to work. You're not going to get away with random training. You have to have a plan to try and help you build up the hours, build up your endurance, your tolerance to stuff on the bike, your tolerance to running. So you will need a plan. So that random training, doesn't really work if you really want to progress on your sport. So if you're a short course and you're just after coming from, if you've just quit rugby like I did years ago, and you just want to jump into a bit of adventure racing and short course stuff, you will get away with random training. You'll get away with it and you'll get through your event, no problem. But if you do want to progress on, certainly if you have a long distance event, you want to just knock that random training on the head and try and get pretty specific with what you want to do. So that would, that then would lead into being specific with your training, and again, developing certain areas of it. Yeah, like that. It's okay not to have a plan, but if you do want to develop on, you really do want to have a plan going forward. So the other one then would be no specificity. I always mix up that word or say it wrong, but it's your event. So, for example, if we've got a short course person, the races like myself and John would do, for example, and they train long and slow. So they actually do the low intensity training that is quite beneficial at certain points in the season for certain events. You will get very, very good at running long and slow if you do that. But if you're a short course racer, it will massively help your aerobic endurance in the base part of the season and will help you get faster essentially. But as you come into the middle of the season, if you just keep on doing that, you're going to get to a point in plateau and you're not going to get very far. So you really do want to get specific about the event that you're in. All right. So if you're if you're doing a massive 24-hour race, yeah, of course, you're going to have to train yourself to be able to work long term in that low intensity zone. But if you're a short course racer, anywhere between kind of 30 or 70, or if your event doesn't involve intensity, you need to train with intensity. You have to, your training should replicate the event that's coming up. So based on the time of the season, so early on in the season, you might be working your base period. You don't need a whole pile of intensity in your sessions. But as you get closer to your races, you really do want to be getting specific with what you're doing. And I would say that's quite why would be quite, obviously the guys that I would train with, that I train, a couple of them on here, they would, they obviously do their own training midweek, but at weekends when we get together, we train specifically for events. And I think that's probably why the guys are quite successful at it, and they place quite well in it, is because we do train very specifically for events. So that's another big thing that I would see, and it's more so for short course stuff as opposed to long course. The too much intensity tends to happen for the long course stuff, and then sometimes we have the low and slow for the short course where it's not really specific. So that's kind of the things that I would see. I know there is a massive broad range of people, so I don't know whether or not there's guys in here that are kind of starting and want to know how to build a plan, or what I do want to cover is just basically putting a plan together. The basics of it, because we don't have a lot of time on it. So, where do you start? What do you do? That kind of thing. So yeah, look, I'll get into that. But again, we've got to remember, guys, it is basic. We're not looking at developing a full annual training plan here. We're just really looking to get a bit specific about what we're going to do, and work from there. And again, if you have any questions, guys, please feel free to throw them up. And then I'll get through them as we go as well, because I do want it to be a bit interactive, because they're the common things I see, but there might be something specific to you that I've talked about that you might want to know about. So yeah, so I'm just going to share a screen, guys, and I will email this out. This is the basic template that I would have, that I would use for my guys in their training plans, and I will send it on as a template if you want it, and you can fill it in. And this would be what I would say to somebody who doesn't have the plan. So if somebody comes to me and they're just looking for some general advice, this is how I would help them along to get started. And then if they want to get really specific and really start to work on the more sciencey side of things, like develop their specific strength, then I can help them on from there. But this is how I would generally do it with somebody if they're unsure about where they want to go and they just want to get a training plan started, and they don't want to go down the road of getting real specific, or getting into monthly plans and stuff like that. So I'll just share this, and again, I will email this on as a PDF for anybody who wants to use it. And again, just basically going through this one here. how to, I'm just going to make my screen a bit bigger because that's what's going. So hopefully you guys can see that page that's there. And this is basically how I would send out generally most of the plans that I would have. So as you can see up the top here, you've got your session 1, session 2, session 3, all the way through. So you'd have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. What you're looking for there, guys, the first thing you want to do, and this is actually another thing that I would see a lot, is define how much time you have to train. Because if it's, again, I should cover this before I get into the plan itself. What we tend to find, I'll say that in a second. What I tend to find as well, train of thought is totally gone. Oh yeah, is people get generic plans. Okay, so they will get a generic plan off the internet. And again, I've done them for like the Quest. I've done this for a few adventure races. Bar is another one. But they pull a plan, and it tends to happen for longer races. So they'll pull a plan off the internet and they'll see like, so the race plan or Quest 24 or Quest 12, and the plan has X amount of hours to train. And they instantly go down the road of trying to exactly mimic that exact plan because that's what it says to do. I would take a step back, and if you're going to use a generic plan, firstly define how many hours you specifically have that you can train and get adequate rest, and then implement the plan. So for example, if the training plan says you need to train for 10 hours a week for the next 12 weeks, do you specifically have 10 hours in your week to train, or are you going to end up making that time to reduce your recovery? So for example, what I would see would be somebody who pulls a generic plan and it says, they got to run in the morning and bike in the evening. So what they do is they'll get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to run for an hour so that they can drive to work. Then they'll drive to work, which is the 8-hour day or whatever it is. They'll come back and they'll do a 90-minute cycle in the evening. And then they'll only get 6 hours rest or recovery in the evening, and then they'll be into day 2. And over time, that will compile, and just the recovery will be out the window, and they'll end up crashing. So, define how much time you have to train would be the first thing that I would say to you, and then start working. So if you have a generic plan, it says 10 hours, and you really have sat down and said, well, I can train in the evening, family commitments, etc. I have an hour or two in the evening, or I have an hour on a Wednesday, or whatever it is, and reduce the plan time to fit your life. Don't make the plan, define your life, because it will definitely end up in and I see it all the time, it will end up in chaos, essentially. Injury, like John was talking about earlier on, is a big one. What will tend to happen is people will overtrain and they'll either get sick or they get injured, and we don't want that to happen. When you're training for an event, you want to be able to train, get through your event, do really well at it, and move on from there. So you don't want to be getting sick the week before the event because you've overtrained. So just to get quickly back to this, guys, because I know we don't want to don't be sitting too long looking at it. I share, where's my screen? This is here. So first thing to do, guys, is define the amount of time you have to train. All right. So if you look at page 5, well, you can use this page as for your time to train, for example. So if you look at it and you say, okay, well, Tuesday, Thursday are out because the kids have X, Y, and Z on, or I just can't do it. So you can say you can train Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and maybe one day at the weekend. So you have 4 days to train. 4 days you can train. It's, an hour midweek. So that's 3 hours midweek. And then you've got, a couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours maybe at the weekend that you can do. So, you've got 6 hours a week that you can train. It would be the first thing I do. So again, remember, this is just basic, just getting set into it. So you've got 6 hours a week that you can train. Then you start to work on, what you're going to do. So for example, the next thing you want to look at is, what is there anything you specifically want to work on? So do you want to get better at cycling? Do you want to get better at running? Or do you literally just want to get into a routine of consistency and run and bike? So we're all involved in multi-sport, so you want to work on those. So what I'd say is, like, you could pick your Monday run session. The type is going to be, a forced session. So maybe a bit of hill work, and it's going to be 30 minutes long. Okay. So you're well within your time frame there. You could make it up to 60 minutes if you want, but start, don't go too mad too early. Your Wednesday, you can make it a bike session. We're early in the season, so we're going to work aerobic endurance, for example, and that's, we've had the session type there, but that's going to be 60 minutes. That's the wrong one, it doesn't matter. 60 minutes, for example, and then the session type again, aerobic endurance, pretty much, you're going to keep it low key, zone 2, for example. with a small bit of zone 3, pushing in for, hills, etc. We won't get into too much detail. Friday then, could be another run or could be another bike session, depending on what you want to work on. We'll say a run session. We'll keep that aerobic endurance as well. We're early in the season. And then your weekend session, if you've got 2-3 hours, depending on, again, what you want to work on, you could put your bike in there. It's obviously going to be a long one. Or if you had an event coming up, you might do a brick session, for example. So, 30-minute run, 60-minute bike run. And that's what you want to do. Again, you put in your session details there. So 30-minute run, easy. That's spelled wrong, doesn't matter. And then, a 60-minute bike, for example. Again, easy, just working on building the tolerance into them. You got 90 minutes. You're well within, that's only 3 hours of training, for example. Oh, sorry, 60 in here for your run, or another 30-minute session here. You've got 3.5 hours in, so you're well within your 6-hour time frame. But essentially, that's what we're looking at when you're developing a plan. Is the first thing you need to do is identify the amount of time that you have. Second thing you want to do is look at where you are in your season and what you specifically want to work on. And then the third thing is trying to lay it out in your week that will suit you. So don't let a training plan as such dictate your life unless you've a real big event coming up. But even at that, recovery is so important. You don't want a plan to basically take over your life, and that you can incorporate recovery in it. Short course work, you're definitely going to you will train very efficiently with a couple of runs, a bike or 2 bikes and a run, and then a real specific session at the weekend. If you have more time to train, yes, that's great. You can train every single day if you wanted to. But again, that intensity thing comes back into it. If every single session during your week is of maximum intensity, you're going to lead to overtraining and you're going to lead to failure. So that's just something to look at. If you want me to dive a bit further into a training plan, guys, I can. But I just saw a question coming up there, and I'll happily take it on. I just thought I saw it. Calculating recovery time. Yeah, so recovery-wise, depending again on your training and how consistent you are with training. So if you're somebody who trains quite regularly, 5, 6, 7 days a week, I would always advise, well, one, you want to look at the intensity of each session to make sure that, say you did a strength session on a Monday, your secondary session on the Tuesday, for example, generally speaking, again, we're talking basics here, and would not want to be a massively high intense session. You try and give a bit, your recovery would be that Tuesday session, an aerobic endurance session, as opposed to a really high, very, very high intensity session. On a scale then, I would advise, again, depending on the person, but generally speaking, every 3 weeks, you should take a reduced, would be a good periodization model. 3 weeks of hard work followed by a week of a lower intensity, and then back up again. And again, you'd work that in between your races as well. But yeah, recovery time per session, you can build up a lot of fatigue throughout a week, but it's over that 3 week period. If you don't take a recovery week, that's when you're going to lead to overtraining. So yeah, that's that question. Is Bernard saying then tour training plan must be reverse periodizing based, longer, slower races than tour training? What do you mean by tour training? Do you mean like long? Again, if let me know what tour means. If that's like, if you mean like really, really long work, then yes. Sorry, I see you're typing away there. Yeah. Tour. Sorry. No, sorry. Then your training plan. Sorry, yeah. Then your training plan must be reverse period based on longer, slower races. Sorry, I don't really understand. Sorry, I don't understand what you mean there. Is Bernard saying then your training plan? Oh, your personal training plan. Sorry, your personal training plan must be reverse period and then long, slow. Yeah. So if you were doing a longer race, if I was training somebody that was doing a really long event, so like Race Around Ireland, etc., that would be all low stuff, or long ultra races. You could do your anaerobic work. If that's what you mean by reverse periodization. Anaerobic, yeah. Your anaerobic work early in the season, and then yes, work to your slower work towards latter part of the season. Yeah. So that would be what you do there. Yeah, because anaerobic work is very, very valuable, but doing it very, very close, you're going to waste a lot of time doing, and the recovery can be you would want to, your anaerobic work can be very, very taxing, so your recovery times would need to be longer, and that might impact on the training you're doing later on. I hope that answers your question, Ian.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, cool. Female specific training, also yoga, stretching, breast and C. Female specific training in what sense? Through, you know, are you talking about S&C there? Because I see that's after it. Or are you talking about long distance stuff? If you get back, I'd let you know. Does Bernard recommend a few S&C sessions? Oh yeah, so talking about S&C sessions each week for adventure races. I would say S&C for everybody, guys. Doesn't have to be for adventure racing. Like strength and conditioning plays a major role. Early on in the season, you can do a little bit more, so you can work a bit more on maximum strength. When you're in season, then I would massively reduce your load. So that again, your S&C work doesn't impact too much with the work that you're doing specifically for a race. Again, we are, you know, racers or multi-sport racers, so you don't want to have that S&C work impact on you know, the sessions. If you do a really heavy session and then you go and race on a Saturday, it's probably not going to work too much. How do you run, jog, cycle, or rather keep it going for more than 24 hours? I can't seem to do tires. Okay, so that's, yeah, it failed me in UTBC. Yeah, BOB granted. Yeah, so that's quite a deep question. So how do you run, jog, cycle rather than keep going for more than 24 hours? That massively comes back to training, and something I'd be happy to talk to, I just don't see the name, about, but it would come down to your training plan. By looking at it, it's either too little training or way too, you know, not taking enough rest, or doing too much training and then leading into the event itself, just being far too fatigued because you haven't taken a break from training. And then when you get to the event itself, it's just far too much. So exactly, with very high heart rates, yeah. And how do you approach easy training with athletes?
Bernard, I could probably answer that one from Daruk, because he's asked me one from around bike fit as well. I could answer both of those.
Yep.
The heart rate one, I just thought it might be a little bit. So I said I was working with you know, metabolic testing, and so yeah, if you do figure out your zone 2 using calculations, it's not gold standard. So therefore,
no.
So maybe your calculation is coming out as very impossible, like practically walking to stay in zone 2. But perhaps if you were to get an actual test, like using gas analysis, which measures your zones based on your, you know, fat burning and carb burning fuel usage, it could come out as a different range, a heart rate range, which could be more achievable. But saying that, you should stick with it if it is something that you require to improve your zone 2 efficiency, because what you'll find after a couple of weeks, you'll start to move quicker in the same heart rate range. So yes, the first couple of weeks are, you know,
slow,
granny jogging, but like it gets better. And I personally experienced that earlier this season. So I've actually started training scientifically for once. So
yeah.
So the
other way to look at that is use lactate threshold. So your lactate threshold heart rate can be a very good way. So you do a physical test. So you know, your max heart rate calculation, again, 220 minus your age, if that's the way you're calculating it, or if you did a max, it wouldn't be too bad if you did a max test, for example. But if you're just using the 220 minus your age, it might be incorrect. But yeah, lactate, using your lactate threshold heart rate, again, if you did a 20-minute jogging test, is a very, very simple way to do it. 20 minutes, that threshold, like really, really pushing hard, that average heart rate can be seen, and it's scientifically linked to being very, very close to your lactate threshold. So you could use that as your lactate threshold heart rate. And Garmin, you just throw it into Garmin and it'll give you your zones from there. So that might be another way to train, and you'll find that there is a significant difference between that and maximum heart rate. But the lactate threshold is very, very specific to what you want to do.
Actually, the same person asked about a bike fit. How often should we get a bike fit for the same bike? So I would say if you come in and you've got like poor mobility, so your hamstrings are very unflexible and you don't have very good ability to do your sit and reach, then your bike fit is going to be set up according to that. So you have potential to change your bike fit if you were to put work in on your mobility. So I sometimes say to people, okay, work away for 6 months and we'll come back in for a review. Perhaps then I can lift your saddle up and still maintain your stability. So that would be the answer to that. So, but if someone is like moving very well and they get set up on their bike, then there's no really reason for them to change that bike fit. unless they get injured and something happens. How can you adjust the bike to make it more race ready, more aero position versus just training position? I don't know if I agree with it. I think that the trend is sort of gone now, where people used to slam the stem, you know, the stem, and they used to put them down at the very bottom so that they had a very a big drop from the saddle to the handlebars. That's now finished with, because comfort equals sustained power. So your headset, your stem should be pretty high, and so that you have comfort when you're in the hoods, and that way you can hold power for longer. And then if you want to get aero, then you just tuck your elbow. You see them on telly, just bend the elbows, get down into that tucked position, and you can still do that on a bike that's set up, you know, like not super extreme, you know. It's very different when it comes to TT bike positioning. That can be set up aggressively versus comfortable. But on a road bike, I would say if the person is injured, then yeah, you might set it up. If their neck doesn't move very well or their upper back is stiff, you might set it up more conservatively. But if the person is moving well, you just give them one that works, where the stability is good. You know, all those metrics that we talked about all line up, then that's the bike fit.
Just to come, go ahead. No, it's just coming back to anything that I covered there. Is there anything that people want to know specifically about? But anything about training plans, possibly setting out their own training plans, or, you know, S&C wise, that kind of stuff. If anyone wants to jump in quickly, they can, let me know there. But yeah, that's basically what I want to talk about. I know it's quite short. Maybe I flew through it. I hope you got something from it. If there is, I'm going to stay on here, guys. I'm happy to chat away to anybody who wants to stay back and talk. Like I said, I know I flew through quite a lot there, or maybe a few things might have hit with a few people, or maybe people want to ask a few more things. So I'm happy to stay and chat away. It's nearly easier to chat away than it is to kind of work through stuff. So
this could be a good chat, Bernard. This could be a good chat. Remember I said about my example of overtraining, right? And it wasn't from doing loads of one thing. It was the bloody ego combined with the Kayathlon virtual race series. So there's this thing called the Kayathlon virtual race series, and they have an event every week. And I was training lovely and consistently, working on areas like zone 2 with some intervals. And then sure enough, that came up. The first race was a 5K. I ran it in a PB because actually the science is class. If you improve your zone 2, you will run faster, just simply because of all the physiology around it. But then it came up to like a duathlon. Then it came to like a fucking Ross Barkley 5K, which was like you have to run a 5K in the fastest possible way within an hour, and you do it in splits. So the point I'm making is that my body was able to manage volume, but I hadn't been giving it fast specificity.
Specificity. They'd always say it wrong.
Yeah, but I hadn't been doing that, and then I expected it to cope with this onslaught once a week hard session. And the result is a hamstring tendon osteopathy. That's what I'm dealing with at the moment.
Yeah. So quickly, I'll run through something like that again. So just again, a lot of us are sitting around, unfortunately, and you know, with no events coming up, or there might not be a whole pile going on. So that's when I would say that you know, if you really want to look to get back into a bit of training, again, I'll send you on that plan. I would say put a basic plan together. Something is better than nothing, where you don't have random training. You know, that you do have a bit of specificity, I can't even say it, there for you to look at, and you can mark it off, especially if you want to get training to something, but unfortunately we don't have many events going on. So, you know, there's 4 weeks in that, you know, in that basic training plan I'm setting out. And literally, if you just write in, you know, your few sessions per week and what you want to achieve in those sessions, you know, if it's 1, 2, 3, 4 sessions a week, and just cross them off every week, you know, that can be something that'll help you get back into running. Because like that, when these events do come up, we don't want to be at a point where, you know, we're just going, shit, here's an event, let's go, and end up injured. So the one thing I'd say is don't overreach. So don't go really, really far at it, but don't underachieve either. You know what I mean? Just pick something that you know you can get done per week. And yeah, if you get extra work done, super. But if you don't, if you just stick to it, at least then we'll be ready for something when it does come up. So, you know, that's a simple piece of advice there.
Okay, super, lad, super. Just one or two things that sort of came to mind, and there's another couple of questions coming in. So please do start, type in your questions there. We'll get to them as soon as we can. You mentioned there was a question there about the rule of thumb for calculating recovery time. You said, Bernard, about 3 hard weeks, 1 easy week. What about specifically in a week? Because I just find myself, maybe it's old age catching up on me. I can't do 7 days training. That's, I find myself, would you say anything in terms of even within a hard week that, you do 3 days, take 1 day off, take 1 day at the weekend, or 1 day Monday or something like that?
Yeah, again, it would be very personal. So you would have to look at your own, you as a person as well, and work it out from there. So when I'm working with somebody, like, we would have, we generally, depending on the event, and what we're working towards, like if it's like an adventure race, something like that, generally I'd have 5 days, not 5 hard days, 5 days in a row, 2 off, and then work from there. So, you'd have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, when, depending on the person, they could train 7 days a week, but at a very, very low intensities. Like, generally speaking, you wouldn't have that many breakthrough sessions. So your breakthrough session or your hard session would be like a really strong force session where you're working a lot of strength, or an anaerobic session, or a hard brick session, for example. But if, then in between that, if depending on the person, so yourself, you can't train 7 days a week, yes, then I would take generally 2 days off of complete rest. And then again, coming towards an event, if it was a really, really long event, I would look to stack the training up together closer and closer. Whereas if it was a short course event, you might, train Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, for example. Just depends on where it goes.
Okay, just a question there then from Kay is about just to go a little bit into aerobic versus anaerobic, and just also you mentioned brick sessions. Not everybody might be familiar with that term.
Yeah, cool. So aerobic is basically working with oxygen, so it's a lower intensity or just below your threshold, and then anaerobic then would be very, very high heart rate stuff. So think about, if you were to put it in a practical term, so on a bike really pushing up a hill, generally speaking, you're not going to be able to work for that long. Depending on the person again, but 3-4 minutes of anaerobic work would be very, very hard. You could go for a bit longer, but it's working above your threshold. So if it's above 100% of your work. So if you're on a bike, if you want to come back again, it's probably going too deep into it, but your threshold power, if it was 100, for example, if your FTP was 100, it would be working up at 110, 20, 30% of that. So it's working well above your threshold. And the same with running. So if you run a 4-minute kilometer for a 5K, it would be working under that number, and it would be working 350s, below. Again, you calculate it on the person, but that's basically it. So your amount of aerobic work, for example, you would do, depending on the zone, would be, you could do that for a long period of time. Anaerobic is above that, and you only do it for a short period of time. Where it becomes really specific is in short court races, you generally work on threshold or in your anaerobic zone quite a lot in short course races. So that's why it becomes very specific. And then I know Ian asked a question about reverse periodization. Would you do that? Again, it's called reverse periodization. I would call it long course periodization, because you're just, it's that you work your anaerobic work at the start, because it's very, very valuable to generating quite high fitness levels. But then getting closer to your race, you would go, longer, slower distancing. So that's how I would answer it. I hope that answers it.
Okay, and just the brick sessions,
would be a bike and run, or run and bike. So where you're blocking up both, so you might run for half an hour and then go out on your bike for 60 minutes and then jump back on a bike if you want to get really specific. But that's a brick sessions where you're jumping from one to the other.
Great.
Over and back.
Okay, so there's a question there from Francis Hine. Just if you can come back to John, he's asking about the detail you're talking about hinging in the knee. So if you can just come back with some clarification on that, be great. John, just one thing. Also, you mentioned one of your early slides about the different parts of the cycle. Your sort of 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock. Is there anything you want to mention as regards how much power you should be putting in? Obviously, there's very little at the top, I would say, quite a lot coming down and around. And also, it's something that I was told years ago from mountain biking is if you're going up a steep hill, your foot should be more at a parallel to the hill type thing, for clipping with SPDs. Can you just touch on that, please?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the thing about the pedaling stroke, right? So getting across the top, you said there at 12 o'clock, yeah, we might not have the most power, but that is because if you're, you know, the way your knee would be up close to your chest, and that can impact your power. And that's actually an important part of a bike fit, because if the saddle is too low and your knee gets close to your chest, then you're going to reduce your power across the top of the pedal stroke. So we want a certain amount of angle there in the hip that we don't really cut back on the power. And that's actually opens up a whole can around power aero trade-off stuff, which again is out of the scope of this talk. So, but yeah, we should be pushing across the pedal stroke. We should actually be, from about 10 o'clock onwards, we should be driving across. I tend to say to people, imagine you're kind of kicking someone in the shin. So you're trying to kick across, and then you're going to continue a smooth movement down towards the 5 o'clock position. And then you actually, the reason why you want to pull lightly at the bottom is because it actually gives your quads a micro break. They just get a little tiny break in the pedal stroke, and that can add up as a nice quad kind of benefit really over the course of a long cycle. So by pulling a little bit at the bottom, you're kind of engaging the hamstrings, and it gives the quads that little tiny break. And it actually continues this lovely smooth pedal stroke that goes around, okay? And then as you come up the back, you actually, there's research showing you're wasting energy if you actively pull up at the back, because you're using hamstrings and hip flexors that aren't really designed to be pushing muscles all the time. So you're only, so the actual advice there would be only do that on an uphill. So that kind of brings in the mountain biking there, right? So mountain bikers tend to pedal 360. You know, they'll pull, like they might drop their heel, like you said, and they'll tend to pull up around the back, and they'll just do a full 360. And that is a good way of pedaling on a road bike if you're going uphill. When you bring in the adventure racing, we tend to be in straps. Sometimes some people are clipped in, some people are not clipped in. The pulling up at the back becomes way more difficult, near impossible if you're not clipped in. So all you can really do in adventure racing, if you're in those kind of setups, is to try to drive across the top more. And you can do lovely pedaling drills where you just focus on one leg and just get that feel, you know, get the feel of pushing across the top. It is not going to come in easy. It takes months, and it's actually going to feel like it's more energy sapping. But if you stick with it, you're developing a pattern, and you become efficient in the long run.
Okay, super, thanks. Just a question Eileen Johan had earlier on there about bike fitting. What level of importance would you put on that to bike fit for a mountain bike? What you did there, I think, was very specifically for road biking.
Yeah, so like I've only ever fitted 3 mountain bikes. One guy did have some hamstring issues, and so when we got him in, like he was one of those ones that just didn't have the flexibility to be as high up as he was. So it's not as important as a road bike, nowhere near as important, because you're just so much more mobile on a mountain bike. You know, you're off the saddle more than you're on it almost. You know, but I would say there is room for a bike fit for mountain bikers, simply because of their saddle just could be in the wrong position. You know, and it's the software will pick that up combined with a physio assessment. Yeah.
And is there any way, just if you were to get a road bike fit, that you would roughly use it? Would you use the same sort of distance, stem to saddle tip or stuff like that on a mountain bike as a road bike? Or would it depend? I suppose there's so many different, if you're riding a 29 or an enduro bike or whatever, I suppose.
Yeah, you don't really, it's more, you want the kind of wrist angle as they come down onto the handlebars, that they're in the right kind of wrist angle, and so they don't really require that kind of as much of that intense focus on the nose to handlebar distance. I don't feel that, but again, I actually don't have much experience working with a manual myself. I only have fitted 3.
Fair enough. John, you can't be an expert in everything. You seem to be the specialty man on a lot of stuff, so that's brilliant. Just trying to think. Susan, is there any questions there I've missed that you feel?
There are no other questions, that's come in, but I just want to mention before people go about the navigation course starting on Monday. in conjunction with Irish Orienteering Association. So it's a 6-week course, open to members and non-members, and I'll put the information in the chat here as well. We've also sent out an email about
just because this is a members only event, we might as well mention that there's a €10 discount. Use the code adventure for members only. Of course, you're not to share it. Listen, it's 20 quid for 6 weeks. It's the money is actually going to the Orienteering Association. They're organising it. It's a very good thing to just get basics in orienteering. But what we might do then is we might just open it up if the guys are good. We're at 8:10, so we might open up here for 5 or 10 minutes if people want to unmute themselves and ask questions. If not, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate you spending the time here on Paddy's night. Get out and have a drink or whatever you have to do to continue to celebrate. It'll be the most sober Paddy's Day for, I think, 99% of the population. But hopefully, as John, I think you put it very well, John, when you said hopefully we come out of this fog soon.
Yeah, hopefully.
I know. I think they put more alcohol into the Beamish cans. I had one yesterday, and maybe I'm just bored. But I'm going out for 2 of them anyway. That's what I'm going to do. You might be out of specific training. I think that might be my specialty. Yeah.
Okay, so anybody, as I said, thanks everyone for joining us, but we're going to hang around here for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever people want. So if people have specific questions or just want to chew the fat with John and Bernard, please unmute yourselves. So thank you very much.
Yep, happy enough to stay around, guys. There's no problem. Any questions or anything like that, or is there anything glossed over or missed, or you want to jump in, let me know.
There was one there, the one about the 24-hour thing. I don't know, I might get Noel O'Leary or Rachel Nolan to comment on it first, but I'll just have a specific thing about something like that. It may be that you've just gone off too hard, where you're not lasting to the end. It's very much a thing in endurance. I've found over the years, specifically long adventure wrestling used to be my big thing. Go off easy at a pace you can talk. Try and stay interested. Like if you're physically tired or mentally tired, if you can stay interested in something, particularly if you're on a team thing, or even if you're on something like the UTMB, get in, talk to somebody, talk whatever rubbish you need to keep yourself awake.
Yeah.
There's no point in particularly going through the night. I don't know, Noel or Rachel or Chris Caulfield there, you guys have plenty of experience in that type of thing. Anything you want to add on that? No,
my mic is after going out there.
All quiet.
Yeah. I would back up exactly what you're saying there, Paul. If it's not down to training like that, sorry, I glossed over the sense of training. In that we'd have to have a deeper look into the training and see how you're going, and that kind of stuff. But 100%, if it's an event thing, going off too hard is a big one, and certainly that has caught people out quite a lot. And something that I go through a lot with my clients in the long is your race strategy and how you go through it, and how hard you start and make sure it's not too hard and go from there. So if it isn't a training thing, that easily could be that. Again, you say your energy levels are depleted. Nutrition plays a massive role, and if you're not working with somebody and you're struggling there, start working with somebody, because nutrition plays such a huge role in race, number one, but in the lead up to the race and your training beforehand. So if you're not getting the quality of your training because you're depleted energy wise, is that a recovery issue or is it a food issue? Going into the race itself, are you well fueled going into the race? And then your race strategy from fuel, from that side of things as well. Have you got a strategy that you can work with and that you have worked with in your training, which is something that's massively important as well. A lot of people I've seen where they will go into a race and try something new. So like they've never drank onshore in their life before, but they've seen somebody else do it and they drink it, and then they're in the bush, dehydrated with diarrhea. And that does happen, and it's something that we need to look at. Always, my advice has always been, no matter what race you're doing, if it's a 5K race all the way up to a 24-hour or 7-day thing, is train with the food you are going to use during your race, because you've no idea what something else is going to do to you, as much as possible, obviously. But if you're stuck in the middle of somewhere with nothing and somebody gives you something, what a choice. But certainly train with what you have, train with what you're going to use. if that makes sense.
And particularly longer stuff. There's a question there from Bernard McDonald. We might get you to address that as well, Bernard. But you know, for the longer races, the more normal food, the better. Forget about gels. Forget about, you know, blowing your head with tailwind for 2 days in a row. As Bernard says, you'll end up either you can't eat, your mouth has mouth ulcers, or you'll end up in the bush. You know, but I think it's very important to train with what you intend to use, and try and stick to normal foods the longer the race. You can get away with it for the 2, 3, 6 hours, probably 10, 15 hours. But I think once you start getting into longer races, you need the normal foods, the pastas, the sandwiches, stuff like that. Would you like to, Bernard, that question there from Cormac? 6 Irish teams, which is amazing, heading over to Kerryman, Scotland, 5 to 6 day race. How would you put together a plan? I think it's a big question. That I think Bernard at ultimateconditioning.ie or
honestly,
bikefit.ie. I think
Cormac is showing his face.
Genuinely, like, I have no problem. Cormac can give you a shout about that. Absolutely. How would you put a plan together for it? It's you know, it depends where you are at the minute, what training you've done before. Again, your time base, what you can do, but it's a long event. You pick what you want to work on and develop it up to there. August is how many months away, like that. If you're well trained, if you've been working up until this point, you know, you could easily start with anaerobic work now, and then you would taper it down and go for shorter stuff, or lower intensity, longer duration work for that. But it's all about the training. It's all about, for an event that long, it's about structured training over a long period of time. Again, getting your recovery in correctly. But again, it would be trying to deal with the individual on that one and trying to get a plan together. But it would be it's long enough away, so you know you would want to be looking at consistent training over quite a lot of days to get that work. Like for the guys who do race around Ireland, for the guys who do those 5-6 day events, RAM, that kind of stuff, it's consistent training. It's day. You could train twice a day depending on what you want to work on early on and late on to get those training hours up and get the tolerance on, the tolerance into the legs essentially. But that's quite a big one. But I'm happy enough, Cormac, if you want to email me your phone, I'll ring you and talk to you about that. No problem.
Yeah, the one thing is that's specifically training related, but I would say about doing any long race, a team race, know your teammates. And like your teammates, because if you get 2 or 3 days in and you're eating the face off each other, it's going to be a long race. And at the end of the day, there's none of us professionals. You're taking a week's holidays and spending a fair bit of money usually going doing these races. So you should generally enjoy the company you're spending. Both training and in the race, it's a bit different. If you're at something like I know Bernard has done a lot with the Race Around Ireland lads and various long distance cycles and stuff like that. It's a personal thing. It's very much different. Team races is different dynamics as well as the training aspect.
Yeah, I totally agree there. Yeah, even the 2-man race across America stuff, you still eat the head off each other. There'll be arguments. But
super. Anyone want to unmute themselves there and join in, or as I say, anyone there got any contributions to make in terms of advice that the talk might be relevant to others?
Again, if you want to,
maybe everyone's just left their computers off and they're done.
I'll say hi, not to be rude, but I won't put my camera on. I'm in the dressing. This is Ellen.
That's Ellen. It sounds like Ellen.
Yeah. Well, I'm in my dressing gown drinking wine, so I'm not going to put the video on.
Is that Ellen in Ballynaclash?
No, Ellen Trim.
Ellen Ditting. How are you?
Yeah.
Helping.
So what advice have you? Come on. You're an experienced
don't drink wine. I've no advice. Don't drink wine. Do whichever suits. Whatever makes you happy.
Listen, it's an interesting thing, like, because I would come across a lot of people and they'd be like, oh no, I'm focusing for this race, the end of August, it's a big race. I'm going to give up drink for six weeks or 6 months or whatever else. Like, Bernard, John, what do you think? I'm I'm of the thing. What life is too short.
I've
don't overdo it as long.
I've got a story. I've got a story to go with this, right? And it's actually it was an Ironman story, and the guy finished. There was like it was in Germany, and there were finishers coming over the line, and they were being offered this beer, and a lot of them were like, no, I've just finished an Ironman. Like, I'm super
Get it into you.
And then one guy took the beer, and sure enough, he won free entry into the next year's Ironman, because it was almost like a trick to see
who'd do it.
I
give it back.
And it's definitely a good, like, I think the thing they did at Quest, the non-alcoholic, brilliant recovery drink.
We had it Erdinger for a while.
Erdinger, fantastic.
I have to say now, I'm not sure, I don't think Ivan Park's on this thing here, but for the Beast of Ballyhowra and the Beast that has been up in Donegal, Ivan has made a specific beeline to the local brewery, the Ballyhowra brewery, and the Kinniger beer. And after 2+ days racing, big bottle of beer at the finish line, goes down very well. I think maybe there's a little bit of difference between adventure racers and Ironman triathletes.
I would be 100% like I would say, like, if it depends on what you're doing. If you enjoy, alcohol or whatever, in the evening, a glass of wine like that, like I was talking about there, it's fine, but what you don't want to do is have an impact on your training if you're serious about where you want to go. That's simply put. Like, if you're going to be going out with a beer every weekend and you want to try and win a race, it's probably, if you're going out in a beer on Saturday, it's going to take you a few days to recover. You're not going to get the most out of your training. So it depends if it hampers. Like, if it's going to be something that hampers your training and your goal is up here, then you're going to have to change it. Whereas if you're just having a glass of wine or a can of lovely Beamish there, John, 100%. Yeah, like, sure, life is too short and you want to enjoy yourself, But again, depends where you go there.
What would your thoughts be on a beer or two the night
before a race?
I think that was the question. Yeah.
That was personally, I wouldn't. Personally, it wouldn't be my thing. Again, look, there's people who do it. Yeah, of course. If you're looking at it from a strictly performance perspective, 2 beers before a race, like 2 pints, probably wouldn't be.
Might not.
Best,
but it could be on the border. Yeah.
But
it might affect
look,
your
if it relaxes you and gets you going. But
yeah.
I'd say from a nutritional and performance point of view, you'd probably want to watch the amount of your drinking. But if you enjoy a pint, have it. Yeah. But again, your goals are going to tailor where you want to go. But no, if you enjoy your beer, like if you enjoy your beer before a race, I would do it. Personally, it'd probably make me vomit, but like I wouldn't be able to do it. But if you enjoy it, why not?
It used to be Peter O'Farrell and I's go-to thing. We'd meet up for a past edition a couple of pints before the Gale Force thing, and he won it several times. I didn't, so
there you go. Like,
it worked for others.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Like, might be fine, might not.
It depends on the person. Yeah.
Exactly.
A couple of beers is very different to going and having a skinful. That's
exactly. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
Okay. So is that all the questions? Then we can all have our
If anyone like that, guys, if anyone wants me to send them through
emails,
if anyone wants me to send them through, just that basic training plan thing, that if they want to try and get some sort of structure on their training plan themselves, they can do that at my number and stuff. If you want to email me through, it went up there early on, Bernard@ultimateconditioning.ie. I can send it out to you. And look, if you want to have a chat about stuff, it's no problem. If you've already got a plan in place, we can chat about that, or whatever. But yeah, if there's any information you want, guys, don't be afraid to get in contact. I'm happy to help out as much as I can. Cheers. As much as I can, And like that with S&C, we didn't really cover the whole pile, but strength and conditioning with endurance events is very, very, important. It is important that how you work it in and out of your season is also very important. So look, I've workout videos and stuff there that I can send people that might help them now if they've no idea where to go or where to start. There's a couple of videos I can send on that can help you through that, just to get you moving.
Can I add then as well, like if anyone's getting any kind of bike related or running related pain, I'm happy. I do like Zoom, like physio appointments if you want. You can actually get a lot from that. Like you just go through the history, figure out why the pain happens, and you can tell a lot from over Zoom. So that's there if you wanted, if you ever feel you want to talk to someone who's a bit more specialized in this area. You have my website and
yeah, John's Bike Fit Physio and Bernard is Ultimate Conditioning. So it'd be brilliant if people, you know, went back to them to get a bit of specific stuff. And, you know, I know both of them have been very good over the last couple of years, specifically for the one-day races where they've given their time and effort, just like tonight, to sort of try and help the sport. And, you know, they compete, so they know exactly what pretty much most of us are at and most of us are looking for. So it's very different to going to your local physio who might or might not be specifically sort of knowledgeable on what we get up to as venture racers.
Yep.
Okay, super. Thank you very much, lads. Thanks for organising.
Thanks, lads.
Happy Paddy's Day, and we'll see you all hopefully for the next session.
Yeah, cool. Cheers, guys. Thanks a million.
see you on the race line there, Bernard.
Yeah, we're sure.